Good to see everyone out tonight. And hopefully the time that we spend here together will be beneficial this evening. Talked to Dad on the way over here. He's still feeling pretty rough. And several others I know our number are sick. There's a lot going on, and we need to be praying for them. I told Kelly yesterday evening that what I was thinking about preaching today, and she said, "Oh, that's such a negative topic." And I didn't mean it to be a negative topic, and I'm not preaching to anybody. I'm preaching to myself. It's something that I feel creeping in my life from time to time, and so it benefited me to study this topic. I want to talk this evening about bitterness. Felt like I was a little bit all over the place this afternoon trying to get these thoughts together. In fact, I never actually got it to paper, just some scratches, but I've got a PowerPoint here that I want us to go through. I am not talking about bitterness towards God. I think all of us understand that bitterness towards God is never justified, all that God has done for us, and I don't think that we have that. There's examples of Hannah was bitter because she couldn't have a child. I'm not talking about that. Job and Hezekiah were bitter. They had illness and loss. I'm not talking about that. I want this evening to talk about bitterness from the aspect of anger or disappointment at being treated unfairly. So this is bitterness that's created because of human interactions one with another. I think is something that I wanted to speak about this evening, this topic of bitterness. I think we all have fuel in our lives for bitterness. And I think statistically speaking, the older we get, the more opportunity that some of these things that we're going to list here in just a minute, and it's not a total list, more and more of those opportunities will have presented ourselves just by the fact that we're around more people for a longer period of time the older we get. But we might be bitter in life because we've been lied about. We might be bitter in life because we've been falsely judged, falsely accused, stolen from, called names, cheated, not valued, lied to, not given credit deserved. Maybe we've been overlooked. That maybe might happen to you at work. Maybe you've not been appreciated by someone, that you feel like you've done something good for them and they didn't even appreciate it. Not given the benefit of doubt, rejected, pushed aside, not invited to some party or event. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Laughed at, treated poorly, not given a chance to explain yourself. So many times, if we just had an opportunity, I think, to explain ourselves, so many of these things could be resolved. Immediately, someone thought the worst of you. Have you ever had that happen? That's hurtful, isn't it? What about being gossiped about? I imagine everybody in this room has been gossiped about from one or more times in their life. That's not you could add to that list. I built that list relatively quickly, but all those things hurt, don't they? If someone does any of those things to you, it hurts. It bothers you. And how do we handle that as Christians? How do we deal with that? And again, you can add to that list. But I think all of us would agree those type things have happened to all of us. Maybe not the smallest of our audience, but anybody older, that's happened to us over and over and over again in our lives. Different scenarios and situations in which someone's not done us right. We've been mistreated, and it bothers us. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, we realize that we think about that more than we should. And maybe it bothers us more than we would like to even admit that it bothers us. And it's kind of floating in your brain sometimes, and it's a little hard to get out. So let's talk about that more this evening. We've talked a lot in the high school class about being mistreated because of Christ. And that's one situation you weren't invited to a party. And I've told young people, I said, once people find out that you've got a reputation of trying to live godly, you're not going to get invited to those wild parties. That's a good thing, right? And maybe someone at the school is going to laugh at you because of the language that you use or you don't use, or because of the life that you're trying to live, or the dress that you try to wear, the modest clothing. You know, that's a good thing. I think oftentimes we don't get, I know we don't get mistreated like early Christians did because of their service to Christ. But when we have opportunity, to me almost I feel like these type situations are a little bit easier to handle. Acts 5:41, and they departed from the presence of the council, rejoicing that they were counted worthy to suffer shame for his name. 1 Peter 4:16, yet if any man suffer as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. If someone treats you poorly because you're a Christian trying to live a Christian life, please don't let that bother you. It bothers you maybe for a minute, but remember this verse and say, you know what? I'm glad I was able to do that. I'm glad I was able to make a stand. I'm glad I was able to be an example. I'm glad I was able to let my light shine enough that somebody noticed enough, and it wasn't the right result. We wanted something better to happen from it, but they noticed enough to at least make fun of me, right? That's really all that happens to us, right? They're going to make fun of us. They'll make a statement against us, but little bitty things, right? We'll talk more about Stephen in a minute. No one's throwing stones at us because of our stance for Christ, but if someone puts a little jab in at you, treats you rudely because you took a stand for Christ, I almost think we should be like here. We should be happy. We should not be ashamed. I think those situations, while not always easy, I think those situations are a little bit easier for us to process, or at least in my mind, I think they are. And I think what should be the absolute easiest thing to resolve is when the hurt or the struggle is between two brothers and a brother and sister, or two sisters in Christ. It should be so simple. Matthew 18:15, moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. And if he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. You know, if Wade said something that hurt my feelings, I had the utmost confidence that I could go to Wade and say, Wade, you really hurt my feelings. And I have 99.9% sure that Wade would say, whoa, please let me explain, that was not my intention. Because I know Wade, I know you all, some of the sweetest people on earth. You're not intentionally saying things to hurt my feelings, and I'm not intentionally saying things to hurt yours. And I think if we just go to each other and allow each other to have a conversation, it can all be smoothed over, right? And I have full confidence if Wade said, hey, I did wrong, he'll say, I'm sorry. And we're going to talk more about that, but my responsibility to him is to forgive him immediately. And that's gone. That's over, right? Let's go fishing. Let's get right back on track. Let's go worship God together. Those situations should be so easy. We should not allow strife and struggle to exist between us. There's just no reason for it. We're on the exact same page, right? If I've done you wrong, I owe you an apology. If I apologize to you, you owe me forgiveness. Over, right? We can move on. We have to move on and think about work together in godly ways. So I really feel like inter-Christian, inter-brother-sister relations in the church really should be the easiest. And they're not always, and there's examples of where tensions between brothers and sisters have blown up to terrible things and split the church, and there's been all kinds of examples of that too. But it ought not be. And in my mind, those are things that we ought to be able to clearly resolve. But I draw a line right there because I think from this point on, I think it gets harder, right? If I'm suffering and I've got this kind of feel bitterness in my heart because someone's done wrong to me because I'm a Christian, I think that's easier to process in my mind. If someone's done wrong to me in the church, I think that's easier to resolve because we're all on the same playing field. We want to be right and go to heaven together. I think those things are easier. For the next part of the lesson, I think it gets harder. But what happens when someone's done something wrong towards me and I don't get an apology? They don't even recognize it maybe. They don't even give it the time of day, but they've done something terrible to me. That, I think, is harder for us to emotionally process. We're left feeling hurt. We're left feeling confused, not understanding why someone would do that. We may even be angry, upset that they did something like that to us. So hurtful, so unthoughtful. And you know, I often find, and you may be the same as me, I find I'm shocked. I'm just shocked that someone would not realize what they did was so hurtful. And I've lots of times I've told people, and it seems like I think about it more as I get older, instead of going into engineering, I sometimes wish I'd gone into psychology so I could just understand what makes people tick, you know. I think I have a pretty good grasp of mechanical processes. You know, what makes a car work? What makes a tractor work? But I'm going to tell you, some of the things that make people tick in their minds, I don't understand. And it's shocking to me, and I can't put my arms around it. I can't figure it out. So when I can't figure that out, I'm just going to have to rely on God and what He tells me to do. And I think that's what we ultimately have to do in all situations. How would God have us handle these situations where someone's done something wrong against us? It's hurtful. It's upsetting. It's shocking sometimes. Well, what are we going to do about it? Well, first we'll talk about a couple of things that won't help us overcome this bitterness. Someone's done something wrong to us. They've not apologized for doing that. I'm upset, I'm hurt, and I need to process that, and I really need to move on. What's not going to help me? Pride is not going to help me, right? We've talked about pride one of the last times I was up here, maybe the last time. One of the points we made was pride. I have written unto the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. You know, Diotrephes, he wanted to hold himself up. And almost like, how dare would you say, he would say, you'd think, how dare you say something to me? I'm Diotrephes, you know, I'm so special. And I don't think that any of us think that we're so special that no one can say anything negative to us. I don't think we hold ourselves up on that level of pride. But I do think at some level, we're a little hurt. We think, I kind of deserve better than that. I kind of deserve to be treated better than I was treated. It's not maybe pride to some gross level that's very visible or totally arrogant, but I feel like in our hearts there is maybe a little more pride than should be there, right? Because I'm offended by the way you treated me. And so in a way I'm almost saying, I deserve better than that. In reality, I don't deserve better than that, right? So if I can, part of my processing of this bitterness and this hurt is I've got to realize that I'm worthless. And without God, I have no hope. I'm a terrible sinner. Someone has sinned against me, but you know what? I sin every day. I'm a sinner too, and I think if we keep that pride stamped down, it's going to help us. Romans 12:13, for by the grace of God, by the grace given to me, I say to every one among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith which God has assigned. All throughout the Bible, it warns us of pride. It does not warn us, you know, be careful, brother, that you think more highly. Make sure you think highly enough of yourself. No, it says, be careful not to think too highly of yourself. We need to be careful about pride. 2 Timothy warns about lovers of self. We are surrounded in our society with lovers of self. That should not be a descriptive term of us as Christians. Proverbs 29 says, one's pride will bring him low. Proverbs 18 says, before destruction, a man's heart is haughty. Proverbs 26 warns about us being wise in our own eyes. Pride will not help us as we try to overcome bitterness in our lives. I think you all would agree with that. I think that's pretty clear. We need to be more humble. That's going to help us submit to God. It's going to help us to be more pleasing. It's going to help us to serve others. And it's going to help us to overcome some of this bitterness. I drew that line because I said below this line it gets harder if, if our brothers and sisters in Christ, we'll forgive each other and work past this. What do we do when there is no apology? But for certain, if there ever is an apology, we need to make sure that we don't lack forgiveness. Because I think real closely tied to this bitterness is the temptation to not forgive, right? You hurt me, I'm mad at you, and I'm not going to let go of it, right? And that's for certain is not biblical. Real quickly, and I know you know this, Matthew 6:14, if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. I need God to forgive me, so what do I need to do? And I have to forgive my brother. Matthew 18:21 and 22, then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? And Jesus said unto him, I say unto thee, until 7 times, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. I'm having trouble reading this evening. Let's just make sure, this is just a real base level point. that anytime someone does wrong against us and they come to us and apologize, we have got to drive this bitterness out of our heart. I cannot be bitter towards my brother or towards anyone who has asked me for forgiveness. I have no choice. It's not, well, I'm going to grade that forgiveness on a scale of 1 to 10 of how sincere I think that brother or sister is, or how sincere I think that coworker is who apologized to me. I'm going to be the judge of whether or not I still have bitterness towards it. No, that's not an option. I have no choice. I have to forgive if someone does wrong against me. I need that from you. You need that from me. We need that from each other. But more importantly than all of that, I need forgiveness from God. And if I don't extend it to you, then He's not going to extend it to me. We've got to make sure that we're forgiving one another. And then I think also it's important for us to remember not to focus on the negative. That is so easy to do. It is so easy for us to focus on what's wrong, you know. Tom's done good for me for a decade, but tomorrow he does something wrong. In my mind, I'm focusing on what Tom did wrong to me tomorrow, and not what Tom has done great for me, the blessing that he's been in my life for 10 years. I'm focusing on this one mistake that Tom made. That's not really fair, is it? I wouldn't want Tom to do the same towards me, right? For that same 10 years, I tried to do right by Tom, and if I do wrong by Tom tomorrow, I sure hope that he's not just focusing on that one mistake I made, but that's so easy in our mind to do, right? Focus on the immediate, focus on the negative, focus on, oh, I was done wrong. And we need to be careful not to do that. Matthew 6:19, you know this verse as well. Lay not up your treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. This world's full of trouble, negative, evil things. Where's our focus? Is on spiritual, on physical things, on this life. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Where is my focus? Am I just focusing on the mistakes that everybody around me makes? Or am I focusing on my life to Christ and serving God and how I can let my light shine to those around me? Or am I just focusing on, I have done wrong and somebody needs to pay? Because that's kind of what bitterness is, isn't it? I've done wrong and somebody needs to pay for this. That won't help. We talked about pride. We talked about lack of forgiveness. We talked about focusing on the negative. What will help? Getting towards the end of the lesson here. Focusing on our blessings. I mean, that's, you know, people talk about the miracle vitamin or a vitamin that just cures everything, you know, or for a long time they said eat kale, lettuce, and it's just a superfood, you know, and it just, you know, there's not just one thing, I don't think, that makes you just perfectly healthy. I know there isn't. But if there's one thing in our spiritual lives that's going to make us happier, I'm confident in is if we will focus on our blessings. God has done so much for us. We need to compare ourselves with Bible examples to gain perspective. We'll talk with you more about that in just a moment. And then we need to refuse to allow anyone to remove the joy of God from our hearts. So I got this coworker who's really a jerk. Am I going to let that coworker make me so miserable that I'm not happy because of what God's blessed me with in this life? Seems kind of silly, doesn't it? That guy might be a jerk. He might be terrible. Nobody might like him. He may be mean to everybody, but I'm going to let that guy make me so negative that I'm focusing on him instead of focusing on God and what He's done for me? That's not right, is it? It can happen, but I need to remember the perspective that I need to have, and my focus needs to be towards God and not towards those around me. Look at Psalms 103. Verse 1 beginning, bless the Lord my soul, and do not forget any of His benefits, who pardons all your guilt, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, who crowns you with favor and compassion, who satisfies your years with good things so that your youth is renewed like the eagle. The Lord performs righteous deeds and judgments for all who are oppressed. That's the God that we serve. Isn't that amazing? Shouldn't I be happy that I've got God like that, a God like that we serve? We should be so happy. And we should not let these little bumps along the way distract us from what our focus should be. Matthew 10:28, and fear not them which kill the body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both the soul and body in hell. These little physical conversations and interactions with other people, that's not the gist of this life, is it? Our focus has got to be on our souls and getting to heaven. Two examples here. When I talk about looking to the New Testament to examples and gaining perspective, here's Stephen that was read for us here just a minute ago in Acts chapter 7, verse 60. And he kneeled down and cried with a loud voice. Of course, he had been stoned. And he didn't say, Lord, burn them all at a stake. He didn't say, Lord, stone them all so that they'll know how bad they've hurt me. Hurt them just as bad so they'll know. What did he say? He said, lay not this sin to their charge. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. He was being stoned. We think, well, somebody's done me wrong. In comparison, in my life, and I think you would have to agree in your life, the majority of the things that are upsetting us, compared to Stephen, are a paper cut, right? A paper cut compared to what Stephen endured for Christ. And I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. I'm readily confessing it hurts. It bothers me. When people do things against me, it hurts. And I know you have been hurt. I'm not trying to downplay it from the standpoint that it's okay and it should be overlooked. But I am saying that mentally, I think I need to downplay it when I compare it to the suffering that people endured for Christ in the New Testament, and I compare it to my suffering. It doesn't really even compare. And Jesus, then said Jesus in Luke 23, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. Jesus could have rained down fire from heaven and destroyed everyone who had been mean to him. But in fact, he prayed for them and wanted good to happen to them. Isn't that an example that we can take? When we say, I want to be more Christ-like, can't we say that about this regard? I want to be more Christ-like in regard of bitterness. I don't want to have bitterness towards anyone. Regardless of what anyone does to me, I don't want to be bitter towards them or anyone else, because bitterness is a disease. It's a disease of our heart and minds. And when we're focusing on bitterness, it's distracting us from focusing on what we should be focusing on. It's like, some things in life you can parallel path. Go two things kind of going in the same direction. But bitterness is in the exact opposite direction of where I'm trying to go as a Christian. Do you see that? I can't be bitter on my left hand and happy and pleasing God on the right. No, they're totally different, aren't they? It's one of those things that's going to pull me away from focusing on, thinking on what I need to be doing, and it's going to just rob me from the joy that God has blessed me with in my life. So some of those things I think will help us. Bitterness is a sin, and we're commanded not to be bitter. Ephesians chapter 4, 31 and 32, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. We've been forgiven for so much. We need to be focusing on those blessings from God and be putting away, it says, this bitterness from us. So the question is, can we overcome bitterness? The answer clearly is yes. The answer is we have to. I'm admitting to you that I feel this creeping into my life at times. And it's sometimes hard to process and hard to push down. But I need to. I need your help. And let me know if I can help you. Let's work together. Our focus has got to be on God and obeying Him and faithful service to Him. This is a distraction. Bitterness is a tool of Satan to turn us from God. We've got to be careful. We've got to be careful. Hebrews 12, verse 14 through 15, follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. Look diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. My hope and prayer for me and for you is that we will cull out any root of bitterness in our life, that we'll remove it from us, and that we'll be positive towards one another, and positive in our faithful service to God. I hope that this has been helpful to you. It's helped me studying it. I'm finishing the sermon on 2 positive verses because I didn't want it to be a negative sermon. It's a negative topic, bitterness. Ephesians 1:3, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who hath blessed us with all spiritual blessings in heavenly places in Christ. John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. We have all been done wrong at one point or another in our lives. But when we leave here this evening, we need to have a smile on our face because of what God has done for us. We are a blessed people. And let's try, as we go into this week, to focus on our blessings and not on the things that can make us bitter and upset. Hope that's helpful to you. If there's someone here this evening who's not become a Christian, this would be the best time to do that before you leave to make your life right with God. If there's someone who needs the prayers of the congregation, please come while we stand and sing together.